If you are tired, why can't you rest? It sounds like a simple question, but for many people, the answer is not simple at all. The body asks for a pause. The mind asks for quiet. Energy starts to drop, and still, rest does not happen. You lie down. You turn off the lights. The room becomes silent. The day comes to an end. But inside, something keeps running. Something stays active. Something remains alert. As if the system were still switched on. As if a part of the mind were still on duty. And this is the first important thing to understand. Your mind does not block rest by accident. It blocks rest for protection. The brain was designed to keep you safe. And for the brain, safety means vigilance. It means checking. It means watching. It means predicting. If there is any signal of uncertainty, the system stays active, even when the body is tired, even when you want to stop, even when everything appears to be under control. Another essential point is understanding that rest does not depend only on time. It depends on perceived safety. Your body can be completely still, but if the brain does not perceive safety, it will not switch off. It will remain alert. That alertness can be subtle. It may not feel like anxiety. It may not feel like fear. It may not feel like worry. But there is a light tension, a quiet sense of attention, a feeling that something still needs to be handled, as if the work were not finished yet, as if something were still pending. That feeling keeps the system running, keeps the mind active, keeps the body prepared, and preparation consumes energy, a lot of energy, more energy than most people realize. Because the brain does not measure effort only by physical movement. It measures effort by how much attention it has to maintain. If the system needs to stay alert, it is working, even in silence, even in stillness, even in the dark. This helps explain why some people feel exhausted even after resting. They stop, they sleep, they try to relax, but the brain keeps running, keeps evaluating, keeps monitoring, keeps checking. That continuous activity prevents full recovery. Another important distinction is the difference between stopping and resting. Stopping means interrupting activity. Resting means restoring energy. Those two things are not the same. You can stop and still not rest. You can lie down and still not recover. You can sleep and still wake up tired. Because real rest depends on deactivation. It depends on reducing vigilance. It depends on a sense of safety. Without those elements, the system stays active. Another key concept is the role of energy. The brain is an energy-demanding organ. Even though it represents a small portion of the body, it consumes a significant amount of resources. Thinking requires energy. Deciding requires energy. Planning requires energy. But maintaining constant vigilance requires even more energy, because it demands continuous activity, continuous attention, continuous processing. When this process lasts too long, energy begins to decline, and when energy declines, the system should rest. But if vigilance continues, rest cannot happen. This creates a cycle. The body becomes tired. The mind tries to rest. The system stays alert. Recovery remains incomplete. Fatigue grows stronger. This cycle can last for days, weeks, even months, until a persistent feeling begins to appear. A feeling of exhaustion, a feeling of depletion, a feeling that something is draining your energy, even when you are not doing physical work. Another mechanism involved in this process is adaptation. The brain learns quickly. If it needs to stay alert for long periods, it adjusts. It resets the baseline. What used to be temporary becomes normal. What used to be unusual becomes constant. This means the system can remain active even after the danger has passed, even after the situation improves, even after the environment becomes safe. Because the brain has learned to stay alert, it has learned that vigilance is necessary. It has learned that rest might be risky, and that learning does not disappear quickly. It needs to be replaced by new experiences. Experiences of safety, experiences of predictability, experiences of stability. Without those experiences, the system continues operating in the old mode: alert mode, monitoring mode, protection mode. Another important factor is uncertainty. The brain can tolerate effort, it can tolerate pressure, it can tolerate challenge. But uncertainty is different, because uncertainty requires constant vigilance, constant attention, constant monitoring, and monitoring consumes energy. That helps explain why waiting can feel so exhausting. Waiting for results, waiting for answers, waiting for decisions, waiting for change. These situations keep the system active, keep the mind working, keep the body on alert, even when nothing is actually happening. Another essential factor is silence. Silence should make rest easier. But for a system that has learned vigilance, silence can increase attention, because silence removes distraction, removes predictable signals, removes movement. And when that happens, the brain increases monitoring. It begins scanning for any sign, any change, any possible risk. That helps explain why some people feel more alert at night, because the environment becomes quiet, and quiet increases awareness. Another important concept is responsibility. When something depends on you, the system stays alert. It tries to predict outcomes. It tries to prevent mistakes. It tries to maintain control. This mental effort continues even when you are resting, even when the day is over, even when the work is done. The brain keeps evaluating possibilities, keeps reviewing scenarios, keeps anticipating problems. This process is invisible, but it consumes energy. Another relevant aspect is overload. When the mind receives continuous stimulation, the system stays active. Notifications, messages, decisions, information. Each stimulus requires processing. Each decision requires energy. When this process continues for too long, recovery becomes incomplete. And when recovery remains incomplete, fatigue begins to accumulate. That accumulation does not happen suddenly. It happens slowly, day after day, week after week, until a constant feeling begins to appear. A feeling of heaviness, a feeling of sluggishness, a feeling of wear, even during moments of rest. Another important factor is the sense of control. When you feel in control, the system relaxes. When you feel uncertain, the system stays alert. Control reduces vigilance. Uncertainty increases vigilance. This simple principle helps explain why unpredictable situations are so exhausting. Unexpected changes, uncertain plans, unknown outcomes. These situations demand adaptation, and adaptation requires energy. Another essential idea is invisible strain. Many people keep functioning, keep working, keep fulfilling responsibilities, but internally, energy is slowly decreasing. This strain does not show up immediately. It builds over time until a persistent sensation appears. A constant tiredness, a lack of energy, difficulty starting tasks, difficulty maintaining focus. These signs do not indicate weakness. They indicate depletion. They indicate the need for recovery. Another important distinction is the difference between tiredness and exhaustion. Tiredness improves with rest. Exhaustion improves with deep recovery. If recovery does not happen, tiredness evolves. If vigilance continues, energy keeps dropping. If energy keeps dropping, the body slows down. That slowing down may be interpreted as lack of motivation, but very often, it is protection. The system reduces activity to preserve resources. Another essential factor is accumulated load. The body can tolerate stress. It can tolerate effort. It can tolerate pressure. But it needs recovery. Without recovery, the load builds. And that load affects energy. It affects concentration. It affects mood. It affects performance. Another relevant aspect is nighttime. Night should be a period of restoration. But if the system stays active, restoration never fully happens. The body sleeps, but the mind keeps working, keeps monitoring, keeps evaluating, keeps checking. and that prevents complete recovery. That is why some people wake up tired, even after a full night of sleep, even after many hours in bed, because the system never fully switched off. It remained active. It remained vigilant. It remained working. And that leads to an unavoidable question. If the body is tired, if the mind wants to rest, if the day is over, why does the system keep running? Because for the brain, resting is not simply stopping. Resting is a signal of safety. And safety is not determined only by the environment. It is determined by perception. The brain does not ask only, is it quiet? Is it dark? Is it comfortable? It asks something deeper. Is it safe enough to switch off? If the answer is not clearly yes, the system stays active. It keeps checking, keeps evaluating, keeps monitoring, even when you are lying down, even when your body is relaxed, even when the day is finished. This mechanism exists for a reason. For most of human history, resting at the wrong moment could be dangerous. Sleeping in an unsafe environment could mean risk. Relaxing before checking surroundings could mean vulnerability. So the brain learned to confirm safety before allowing deep rest. It needs consistent signals, repeated signals, reliable signals. Without those signals, the system remains alert. Another important factor is memory of effort. The brain records periods of high demand, periods of pressure, periods of responsibility, periods of uncertainty. And after those periods end, the system does not immediately return to its previous state. It stays prepared. Prepared to repeat the effort, prepared to respond again, prepared to act. This state of readiness can last longer than the situation that created it, which means that even after the problem disappears, the body may still be ready, still attentive, still monitoring. Another relevant concept is residual load. Every stressful experience leaves a small trace, a small activation, a small tension. When these experiences accumulate, the residual tension accumulates too. And that accumulation keeps the system active. Even during rest, even in safe environments, even when everything appears to be under control. Another essential factor is predictability. The brain relaxes when it can predict what will happen, when it recognizes patterns, when it detects stability. But when the future feels uncertain, the system increases vigilance. It tries to anticipate changes, detect signals, avoid surprises. This constant attempt to predict keeps the mind active, keeps the system running, keeps the body prepared. Another important factor is the habit of thinking. Thinking repeatedly about situations, reviewing events, anticipating possibilities. That pattern becomes automatic. And once it becomes automatic, it continues, even when it is no longer necessary. The brain learns to stay active, learns to keep working, learns to remain switched on. Another relevant aspect is attention. Attention is a limited resource. When it is used continuously, energy declines. When energy declines, the body slows down. But if attention continues to be demanded, rest does not occur. This creates an internal conflict. The body asks for pause. The system asks for vigilance. And that conflict generates fatigue. Another important mechanism is energy conservation. The brain tries to preserve resources. When energy drops, it reduces performance, reduces speed, reduces initiative, reduces motivation. This does not mean lack of willpower. It means protection. It means preservation. It means survival. Another essential concept is transition difficulty. The brain does not change states instantly. It needs time to slow down, time to reduce activity, time to perceive safety. Without that time, the transition does not happen. The system remains active, even when you try to rest. Another relevant factor is the relationship between responsibility and vigilance. The greater the responsibility, the greater the attention. The greater the attention, the greater the effort. The greater the effort, the greater the wear. This process is continuous and often invisible, but the impact is real. Another important idea is silent depletion. You keep functioning, keep working, keep completing tasks, but energy gradually decreases, without dramatic warning, without sudden interruption, just a growing sense of fatigue, a growing sense of effort, a growing sense that rest is never enough. Another essential factor is perceived threat. The brain does not respond only to real danger. It responds to possible danger. It responds to uncertainty. It responds to change. That means the mind can remain active even when there is no immediate risk. Because the system prefers prevention, prefers certainty, prefers confirmation. Another important point is continuity of effort. Effort does not end when the task ends. It ends when the system perceives safety. If that perception does not occur, effort continues. Even in silence, even in stillness, even during rest. Another relevant concept is time. The brain needs time to recover, time to reorganize energy, time to reduce activation. Without that time, the system remains overloaded. Another important distinction is the difference between resting and recovering. Resting means stopping activity. Recovering means restoring energy. You can rest without recovering. You can stop without restoring resources. That happens when the mind remains active, when the system keeps running, when vigilance remains present. Another essential factor is the relationship between energy and performance. When energy drops, performance drops. When performance drops, frustration appears. But the cause is not always lack of effort. Very often, it is lack of energy. Another important factor is incomplete recovery. If recovery does not happen fully, energy does not return fully, and when energy does not return fully, fatigue accumulates. That accumulation creates a persistent sensation, a feeling of exhaustion, difficulty starting tasks, mental slowness, lack of clarity. Another relevant aspect is prolonged stress. Prolonged stress keeps the system active, keeps the body alert, keeps the mind working, even after the danger disappears, even after the situation improves, even after the environment becomes safe. Another essential concept is protection. The brain is not trying to sabotage you. It is trying to protect you. It is trying to maintain safety. It is trying to avoid risk. It is trying to ensure survival. Even when that creates discomfort, even when that creates fatigue, even when that makes rest difficult. Another important factor is understanding. When you understand what is happening, the experience changes. Guilt decreases. Frustration decreases. Self-criticism softens. You begin to see that the problem is not weakness, not lack of discipline, not personal failure. It is exhaustion. Another essential factor is the relationship between energy and functioning. The body depends on energy to operate. The mind depends on energy to think. Without sufficient energy, performance declines. That is natural. That is biological. That is predictable. Another relevant experience is the feeling of emptiness. Some people describe it as lack of motivation, others as lack of strength, others as lack of focus, but very often the cause is simple: lack of energy. Another important concept is limits. Every system has limits. The body has limits. The mind has limits. Energy has limits. When those limits are reached, performance declines, not by choice, but by necessity. Another essential factor is preservation. The brain reduces activity to prevent collapse, reduces effort to preserve resources, reduces speed to protect the organism. This behavior is intelligent. It is adaptive. It is necessary. Another relevant idea is perceived failure. When energy declines, performance declines. When performance declines, the feeling of failure may appear, but often it is not failure. It is depletion. It is lack of energy. It is need for recovery. Another important shift is perspective. When you understand that the problem is not incapability, pressure decreases. When you understand that the problem is energy, guilt decreases. When you understand that the system is overloaded, self-criticism softens. And that leads to an important conclusion. If your mind will not let you rest, if your body feels tired, If your energy keeps dropping, then the problem may not be lack of effort. It may not be lack of discipline. It may not be failure. You may simply be running with insufficient energy. You may be trying to operate with limited resources. You may be trying to keep going, even with an empty tank. And that brings us to the next question we need to explore. If you are trying, if you are making an effort, if you are doing the best you can, but still feel slow, tired, low on energy, then perhaps the problem is not failure. Perhaps you are simply running without fuel, and that is exactly what we are going to explore next. Why you are not failing. You are running on empty.